Happy Friday to everybody that's on. So glad to have you. Greetings and welcome. I'd like to welcome you to another conversation. Please, 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 as you hop on, go ahead and send some hearts our way and go ahead and share to other friends of yours, either through your personal page or on Messenger, or if you are able to share to a group, particularly a group of women, please do so. But I want to thank you so much for coming on with us tonight. We are definitely excited, but a little anxious to have another important, relevant, but sensitive conversation. In line with October being Pregnancy and Infant Loss Awareness Month, and yesterday in particular, October 15th being Pregnancy and Infant Loss Day of Remembrance, tonight, I, along with tonight's panelists, will be having a sensitive discussion about our own experiences with premature losses, either through miscarriages, stillbirths, or infant loss. Again, a very sensitive topic, but I, along with tonight's panelists, am determined to remove the silence and the shame from the topic. So again, take a moment to share this matter with someone else. And I do thank you for being with us tonight. So go ahead, please share, like I said, either to your personal Facebook page, you can share it to a group, or you can share it in Messenger. But if you think that this is something that someone else would benefit from, please do so. For those of you who may be new to this platform, I'm the host and moderator, Dawn Charleston-Green, the creator of Dawn of a New Day 365 Life blog. And I want to welcome you to our fourth conversation. Those of you who have joined us and watched previously, recall that we have had conversation between women, both Black and white, about the state of our nation regarding the global pandemic of the coronavirus, as well as the pandemic of racism. Then in our second conversation, we addressed Men's Mental Health and PTSD Awareness Month, a conversation that we call Not All Scars Can Be Seen, a conversation about men's mental health and its effect on the family. And then our most recent conversation, which was actually last month, we discussed going back to school in a pandemic. Is it working? Where we had educators, parents, students, representatives from Texas, Louisiana, Georgia, Tennessee, and South Carolina. And it proved to be a very insightful conversation, to say the least. But if you or someone you know may be interested in watching those conversations, you can find them on YouTube at Dawn of a New Day 365, simply titled The Conversation. Today's conversation, I submit to you, is a sensitive discussion between women remembering their experiences with premature loss. And as always, we have a great panel of guests from Georgia, Louisiana, and then we went up top this time and got somebody from Illinois. Well, I take that back. I was about to say along with a medical professional tonight. However, we did have an OBGYN who was supposed to be with us tonight. And as it would happen, she got called in to deliver a baby just right before we came on to the call. And so she won't be with us. And so we're going to go ahead and go forward, because this is still a good conversation for us to have with those who've experienced it. Okay. But before I introduce tonight's guest, let me first ask that everyone send hearts our way, as well as go ahead and share it like I asked before, live with someone. Please invite someone else to the conversation. So with that being said, we need to put out just a few ground rules about the conversation. Remember to be kind and thoughtful in your comments, please. As we have our conversation today, we will not bash or degrade anyone's opinion or experiences. These are their experiences, our experiences, and so our interpretations of them are very sensitive in nature. Please, by all means, though, chat with us and add to the conversation in the comments while we're going live. And if you have any specific questions, just type a capital Q before your question so that it can be quickly identified. And we will do our best to try to address any questions either now or in the feed once we conclude, or to you personally. So again, just remember to be thoughtful in your comments as we go forward. Don't bash or shame anybody for any of their experiences or their interpretation of what they've gone through. Please add to the conversation in the comments. And if you have a specific question, type a capital Q in the comments before your question so that we can easily identify it. So those are the ground rules. But again, I thank you for joining us for the conversation. Now, let's welcome our panel. First, we are going to start with Miss Ginette Williams. Miss Williams is an executive director in advocacy and social work, she lives in Georgia. She comes to the conversation having had a miscarriage. Though recently divorced and no biological children of her own, she holds dear her two stepdaughters. She adds that she wants people to talk more openly about tonight's topic because the stigma around it is real. Please welcome Miss Ginette Williams. Ginette, will you unmute and please say hello?
Hi, everybody. Thanks for coming on.
All right, next we have Miss LaKrisha Lindo. LaKrisha is a human services caseworker in the state of Illinois. She adds to the conversation with having 3 first trimester losses by miscarriage and 1 second semester loss at 20 weeks, who was stillborn. Ms. Lindo shares that she has never publicly shared these losses and how they've affected her. Only the people close to her and only if it came up. But she is ready to talk tonight. And so to add to that, LaKrisha is married. She has 4 children, ages 28, 22, 11, and 5. She adds her oldest was full term at 38 weeks. Her 22-year-old was delivered at 25 weeks. Her 11-year-old was delivered at 28 weeks, and her 5-year-old was delivered at 36 weeks. So she has a lot to add to the conversation. So thank you, LaKrisha, for being with us tonight. Please say hello.
Hello, everyone. Thanks for having me.
All right. Next, we have Miss DeAnne Winey. Miss Winey is a director of clinical research in Louisiana. She comes to the conversation being the mother of Megan Elise Ward, who lived 7 hours after birth. She also miscarried after 6 weeks. DeAnne is divorced with 2 healthy children. She adds, speaking tonight gives me the opportunity to educate as it relates to the topic. The opportunity to discuss this topic gives mothers and parents a chance to express themselves in an environment where they don't feel alone and isolated. They are included in the discussion and they have our empathy and support. That's valuable when someone is hurting. Being able to share in each other's relatable experience is strengthening to those of us who feel emotionally misunderstood as a result of our loss. So with that said, thank you, and please welcome Miss DeAnne Winey.
Hello, thank you for having me, Dawn. I appreciate the opportunity to be able to share my story.
Good, good. And I'm so glad to have you. And tonight, I also, Dawn Charleston-Green, add to the conversation, having had 3 miscarriages, December 2015, December 2016, as well as most recent March 2019. I am married and I have a healthy 22-year-old son and a 10-year-old daughter that we adopted. Tonight, my goal is to give voice to the silence, the shame, the secrecy, and the guilt associated with the topic. I learned after having my miscarriage that God was going to use even this thing that put me in my lowest and my darkest place at one time of depression and sadness, but he was going to use it for my good and his glory, and that he was going to allow me to help other women to process and walk out of their shame surrounding the subject. So I thank you for just allowing for the opportunity for us to have the conversation and for you to listen. So tonight, originally, I was going to begin the conversation with Dr. Adams Pickett, who again is on call, and so she won't be able to add to the conversation tonight. But my first question to her was, what the main cause of miscarriage? And so I went on and I looked up some information. And it says, what are the main causes of miscarriage? It says the majority of miscarriages occur as a result of genetically abnormal embryos. Conditions that are also known to lead to recurrent miscarriage are blood clotting disorders, endocrine disorders, submucal fibroids, and other structural abnormalities in the womb, as well as hormonal issues commonly seen with ovaries. In a small percentage of people, a genetic abnormality can be passed down, resulting in miscarriages. And so what I wanted to ask tonight of our panelists was for everyone to briefly describe your first experience with this type of loss. How far along were you? And how old were you when you experienced your miscarriage? So let's go ahead, just start with Ginette. Ginette, will you briefly describe your first experience with the loss?
Sure. So mine was my first experience with a loss and first pregnancy. It was November of 2018. So I was 37. And had no clue that I was even pregnant. And this was after about 7 years of trying to get pregnant. And so just kind of at that point, kind of given up and, come to terms with the fact that it just may not happen for me. And I was really, how I found out, I'd been bleeding and I just expected that it was my normal period, but went to the movies with my youngest stepdaughter and just was really feeling sick afterwards. Went to the house. I vomited. I just knew something was wrong. My stomach was hurting really bad. And so then ultimately I had a miscarriage. I didn't know it was a miscarriage at that point, but we went to my husband at the time took me to the hospital, and they asked me, do you think that you could be pregnant? And I was like, well, probably not, because for 7 years I haven't been pregnant. But ultimately they did all the tests, ultrasounds, and yes, I was. So far along enough to know it was a girl. And I don't know, very, very traumatic experience for sure in that hospital that night. Again, that was the first pregnancy that I had that I actually even maybe knew about. So that's that.
And so I'll just kind of go ahead and just ask you, how did you take that on? Like after you realized you were pregnant and you had the miscarriage, how did you take that on?
For me, it was, oh my God, how could I not know? Like, this is my fault. Like, if I would have known, could this have been prevented? And I think that for me, that was just the amount of guilt that I had I examined everything that I had done for the past 8 weeks in my life. And I'm like, okay, like, what have I been doing? Like, have I been healthy? I've been bleeding a little bit longer and heavier than I should have. Why didn't I get help before then? But yeah, for me, that was probably the biggest part of just like, why did I not know? I didn't know my body well enough to know that I was with child. And of course, it was also the shock of, wow, I don't know. It's kind of like a shock, but also like, oh my gosh, this could happen. Because I also thought it could never happen, So it was like it's a lot of mixed feelings going into that. But ultimately, I mean, it was just being told that I was pregnant, and then, what did I want to do with, ultimately the fetus at that point. I want it buried or what? And those questions I just was not prepared for at all. So, yeah.
And did I ask how old were you at the time?
I think I was 37.
Okay.
Mm-hmm.
Okay. And we're gonna come back to that. DeAnne, you want to go ahead and share?
Yes, ma'am. I was actually my first pregnancy. I was 31 years old. I was actually taking a bath. I had gone to the hospital that week. Let me back up for a second. I'd had the same OBGYN for 15 years, really wonderful doctor in New Orleans. And I decided, something told me to pre-register that week. So I had gone for an appointment. I didn't have any, I didn't have any issues. I didn't have any health issues. I wasn't taking any medications. I didn't have any medical diagnosis or anything like that. So I had a really good, clean pregnancy.
Mhm.
So I thought. That visit, I decided to pre-register at the hospital. And thankfully that I did, because 2 days after I pre-registered, I was, it was probably about 4 o'clock in the evening. And I didn't go to work that day because I felt just extremely tired when I woke up. So I decided to drag myself up, and I was taking a bath, and I went to lift my leg because I was shaving my leg, and my water broke. And so I immediately, from the bathtub, I grabbed my phone and I called my doctor's office. And the young lady was like, well, you need to schedule an appointment. Needless to say, my voice raised about 20 decibels when she said that I should schedule an appointment, because I realized she didn't understand what was taking place. So my husband at the time picked me up, and he got me dressed, picked me up, put me into the vehicle, and in 5 o'clock traffic in New Orleans, I was rushed to the hospital. So I contacted the hospital while I was on the way there, and good thing they remembered me from when I pre-registered. And so they immediately took me to the unit, and I'm sorry.
You're fine. Take your time.
And they told me that my baby was not going to make it. And that was very shocking for me, because I was just fine just an hour prior to that. And then I was hearing that my daughter was not going to make it. So I was hospitalized for 6 weeks, because at the time I was only 5 months pregnant. And so lung development doesn't really start until 6 months. So I still had 4 weeks to go. So I was not allowed, once I was hospitalized at that time for 2 weeks, I was not allowed to get out of the bed. I had to take sponge baths. I had to use the little toilet seat in the bed. At one point, I had to eat while I was laying on my back, because again, they were trying to see if I would accumulate more amniotic fluid, and that was going to help with lung maturation. And so they told me that my doctor, no one actually told my doctor that I was on my way to the hospital. So he actually went home, and he wasn't aware of what had happened to me until the next day. So the on-call physician told me that what was likely going to happen is that I would develop an infection within the next 3 days, and that they would have to take the baby to save my life. So once I finished crying and I got myself together, I decided that she didn't give that life, so therefore she couldn't tell me when it was time to give up hope. So I lasted the 3 days, and I was moved to an extended care side of unit of the hospital. And I was the only person on that wing of the hospital, I mean, by myself. And they made it like a dorm room. And so my cousin stayed with me. My cousin Jessica stayed with me every single day. She was there, and my husband would visit when he wasn't, my ex-husband would visit when he wasn't at work. And so they told me that I had to make it to my 6 months, and I would get a steroid shot that would help with lung development. So I made it to the 6-month marker. And let me just say, in between there, at one point, a perinatologist saw me, 2 different perinatologists. And that is the doctor that is there for high risk pregnancy for the for the mother. And the neonatologist, I also saw her as well, and she's there for the high risk pregnancy, but for the baby. And so the first perinatologist told me that I could stay in the bed for another 6 weeks, 8 weeks. I could get the steroid shot. And he said, but the bottom line is your baby's not going to make it and you have options. And so the options that he was speaking of was to abort my daughter. And mind you, I didn't know that she was a girl at the time. It's just when I was in 8th grade, into my spirit, it was put that I was going to have a daughter, and her name was going to be Megan. And I had her name picked out since 8th grade. So I knew she was going to be a girl. I didn't find out, confirm that she was a girl until I actually delivered. But I canceled that physician and I asked for another perinatologist. And my second perinatologist, I actually remember everyone's name, Dr. Gary Dildy. He was really, really a wonderful doctor. And he said he was willing to go the mile with me. So I got this, I actually went into labor exactly at my 6th month. I was due to receive my steroid shot that my water broke at 4:15. I went into labor at 4:15, 4 weeks later. And they tried to stop the labor. And so they actually gave me a steroid injection, but I had to deliver by emergency C-section. And I did, and she lived for 7 hours. And so they took her off of the ventilator and they let her go peacefully with me and my ex-husband.
And it definitely sounds like, though a very tragic loss, that you did though have the medical support that was there, and that's not always the case for everybody. So you were definitely blessed in that regard to at least have that type of support around you, because again, not everybody has that story as a part of the story, and it's almost like there's increased trauma, not just from the miscarriage, but then also the treatment that is received around it. And so at this time, I'm going to go ahead and kind of get LaKrisha to chime in on that. I'm not sure what each of your experiences were, LaKrisha, but can you share with us, particularly like your first one, and also with the stillborn? Can you share that with us?
Sure. Can you hear me okay?
Yes.
All right. So my first 2 pregnancies were pretty much like Ginette. I didn't really know I was pregnant. When I found out I was pregnant, I was doing all of the things that you do. You're at the doctor's appointments and things like that. The difference for me with the first 2, though, was that I never actually officially miscarried. By the definition, I was in the hospital, it was an ultrasound, and there was no heartbeat. So when that happens, they tell you then, well, there's no heartbeat and it's not going to just start again later. So you can wait for yourself to miscarry, or you can go ahead and schedule a D&C. And either way, it doesn't make it any easier, but you're then faced with having to make that decision of what it is exactly you want to do at that point. So my frame of mind, because with the first one I was 34, I just did not want to walk around for days waiting for it to happen. Mm-hmm. That just didn't make sense to me. So I scheduled procedures for both, and then had the D&C done so that I could just try to get back to some normalcy in my life. But the third miscarriage was the one that was absolutely pretty much to a certain extent identical to DeAnne's. We were getting ready to leave and go out of town, because even though I live in Illinois, I'm from Louisiana, so we were heading to Tennessee, where my husband is from. And, I didn't feel good. And I said, just hold on. I went to the bathroom. There wasn't blood, but there was something that just, maybe it was mucus or something now thinking back. I don't know what it was, but it wasn't supposed to be there. And I said, I think I better go to the hospital before we go. And we went to the hospital, and during my examination, the doctor was like, "Oh, I see the baby." And I thought, "What do you mean you see the baby?" And it was like, "Your cervix is opening, we see the baby." So immediately rushed downstairs to a neonatal unit where I was sent in for an emergency cerclage to try and close my cervix. I was on my back, but feet in the air, the same, trying to make everything go back where it was, hoping that my cervix would close, that everything would be, okay. And even though it wasn't 1 minute I was okay and the next minute I wasn't, it was somewhat like that because they did give me a little hope that after the cerclage, we might be okay. Because at that point, I was 20 weeks, maybe 19. And they said, you know, looks like everything's going to be fine. And within like maybe a day, my water broke, but I was already in the hospital. And I thought that I could just kind of lay there and leak for the next few months. And they were like, no, you can't do that. You could get an infection.
Mhm.
And if that happens, it could be, again, like DeAnne, it could be very detrimental to you. So they told me I didn't have any other option but to deliver. And they then prepped me, and I had to call my husband and say, hey, I'm going into delivery. And he was like, what? And I was like, I don't even know what to say. And getting into the delivery room, by then I was 36. So I actually skipped a few years, but this was in 2007. So I was 36 at that point. And they got me prepped for delivery, but they did the same thing. Your son is not going to live through this delivery. We do not want to, um, you know, do a C-section. This is something that just needs to happen naturally. So they just induced me, and I just delivered that he didn't live through. And of course, I got to hold him, and it's traumatic. It's something that you just never forget. You don't know how you're going to go on. It was the worst thing at that point imaginable because I just didn't understand what was happening. And having had a premature daughter with my second pregnancy, I didn't know what questions to ask, to try to help myself be better prepared for any future pregnancies that I might have. So that would have helped if I had known what was happening. I should not have been having my 22-year-old at 25 weeks when that happened. And yet, at 25 weeks, they were able to give her, everything that she needed in order to try to build her lungs, and, sent her to NICU where she stayed for 3 months. And then she came home and she graduated from college back in, this spring. So it's just, you don't even know how to wrap your mind around any of it, but it's definitely traumatic. And I just feel so terrible for any woman that has to go through something like that, because a lot of times they tell you that type of situation has to happen before you know what you need and what you have to do in order to go forward. Because even after that, I had another miscarriage, but it was first trimester, but I did have two more children
Mhm.
after that as well. So
And only one had a shortened um, gestation, right?
after,
After. So your level,
yes.
oh, yeah.
Yes, she did, because with her, and by this time, I was 38. She Things started happening again because no one really talked to me about exactly what it was that was happening. I not only had an incompetent cervix, I also had hormonal imbalances that were causing me to go into labor early. So the hormonal imbalance caused me to go into labor early in 1998. And I had no idea that that's what was causing that. But also coupled with an incompetent cervix, which caused, the labor as well. And then you fast forward to 2009, and now, my cervix is incompetent, but they didn't address the hormonal issue. So while my cervix was closed and ready to go at 14 weeks, because it was planned at that point, we know that you need to have a cervical cerclage. It didn't matter because the hormonal issue wasn't addressed. So around 24 weeks, I started going in labor. And when I started going in labor, they were like, we're going to put you in the hospital and you will remain there until you deliver. And I thought, that's a long time from now. But that was the plan. And they started giving me hormonal injections then, but it was almost too late because with my 8th pregnancy, the 5-year-old, the hormonal injection started like around 14 weeks right after the cervix was cerclaged. So some things just have to happen at certain times in order for you to have a better success rate. And that was the situation with me. I needed to have those hormones earlier on than I was able to receive them. And so when I didn't get them, it was almost too late. So about a month into the hospital, my water broke. She was 28 weeks at that point, and then I delivered her at 2 pounds, 6 ounces, and she stayed in NICU for 3 months.
Okay.
So, yeah.
And this was after your stillborn. So I'm still, I'm sure that still, with your second, and then with your 3rd birth child,
right,
still with low birth weight, I'm sure you still just kind of had some of those fears that, what might happen
right
during that time.
Because with preemies, they don't give you hope. They don't tell you, oh, it's going to be fine. It's like they could have, cerebral palsy. They could have brain damage. There was brain bleeds for both of them, now that I know what was happening. There's just so many different things that could happen, even if they're able to survive. So they really don't give you any hope. You just have to stay on your knees and just pray for the best, outcome. And that's what we did.
Well, I know that having talked to you after some of your experiences, and you were one of the people that I called when I had mine to apologize, because you don't know, as a woman.
Have to apologize.
Well, after I experienced it, I did, because then I realized that I had not offered you the support that you needed. And so, but you don't know until you know. I did not know what you were actually dealing with until I experienced it for myself. And so just, with my own story, I was 40. And so, there are doctors who will tell you that age plays, a part of it. But I was not at that time, I want to say planning to get pregnant. I hadn't been on birth control since about 32, 33. And so when nothing happened between that time, I just assumed that, hey, it just may not be meant for me to get pregnant. And so in my mind, I think as I approached 40, I was just kind of, just coming to, the conclusion, okay, well, hey, Rudy's going to be your only biological child. You're not going to have any more children. And so I remember I was doing a training at the time, and I was used to it. Like, it always lasted 2 weeks. And so I was just completely tired. I didn't know why I was this tired. Like, I had been tired before, but this was a whole new tired. And because, Rudy at this time was 15, 16 years old, I didn't remember what the tired I was going through was. And so when I began to just kind of just really be fatigued, and just tenderness in the breast and everything, I wasn't associating it at all with being pregnant. I thought I was going through early menopause. And I literally called my mom and said, hey, what happened when you go through menopause, And so we started talking about certain things. And so I could tell she was like, oh, don't sound like you have menopause. And so she said, I really think that you just need to go to the doctor. So I just kind of blew it off like, yeah, okay, I'll go to the doctor. So I did. I made an appointment. And within a couple of weeks, I went to the doctor. And so they called me and they said, hey, we need you to come in to do some more tests. And so then it's like, what you need me to do more tests for? Like, what's going on that I need to do more tests? And so they said, well, we know for certain that you are not going through menopause. And so then I'm like scared, like what's wrong now then? And so she said, well, you're not going through menopause because you're pregnant. And I was like, where they do that? Like, what are you talking about? I'm about to turn 40. Come on. And so I remember in that moment, like, God, you just don't ever want me to be rid of little bitty people. Like for the rest of my life, you want me to be dealing with this. And I just kind of, laughed it off a little bit, but I was not thinking that at the age of 40 that I would be preparing to possibly have a baby. And so I kind of went through my own share of emotions, just like, really, like I'm 40, like, my son is about to graduate from high school in a couple of years. Are you serious? And so I wasn't sure about how I felt, so I didn't say anything. One of the other reasons I didn't say anything, because there's also shame associated with women who have babies later in life. And so I did not know how people would respond to my 40-year-old self being pregnant and about to have a baby. And oh, by the way, my husband is 10 years older than me. So he's 50 years old and somebody talking about they finna have a baby. So, people are just like, what y'all doing? Apparently we doing something, productive. But anyway, just, joking in that. But because by this time, my husband already has adult children. He already has grandchildren. Yes, but he has a wife that's 10 years younger than him. So here you have it. But I really didn't know how I felt for a while. And then finally, when I put on my big girl underwear and said, okay, I'm ready to take it on. It is what it is. I went out that Saturday and bought maternity clothes. And that Monday I miscarried. And that was devastating because I had just accepted it and received it. And now all of a sudden it's gone. And so I went through a period of time where I was angry with God. I was almost like, I didn't ask you for this. And you gave it to me and then you took it away from me. Like, this is too much. Like it was just one set of emotions. And then immediately I'm on the other platform. And so it was just like literally being in a pit of darkness. Like I did not know that I could be in that type of dark place. I had no idea that I could be in that dark place. And so I remember, the cramping and knowing that something was wrong, I began to spot. And so I told my husband, that we need to go to the hospital, that something is wrong. And so, but I was trying to get the kids out of the house for school that morning because I really didn't want them to be a part of the process. And so I remember doing Anasia's hair and getting her out of the door. And as soon as I stood up from doing her hair, that's when it happened. I felt it. And so just, I won't get into the details, but you all know, and there are others who may be watching who know exactly what I'm talking about, what took place and what came down. And at that point, it was just, I felt just such a brokenness. I felt such a weakness, like what was wrong with me. And when we got to the hospital, I went to the emergency room. From my experience, and I'm so grateful for DeAnne and hers, that was not my experience. They did not have bedside manner. They did not treat me as though I had just lost a child. It was like I was in there for anything as common as the flu, honestly. And so I went through the process, and like, I'm not a kid, I'm not a teenager. I'm talking about, I'm 40 years old. I'm fully aware of my feelings and everything that I have going on. And so just to be in that moment and you don't say anything. And so it was just like, okay, it is what it is. You're going through this process. We make sure everything is good and you follow up with your OBGYN, but there was nothing personal. I didn't know anything. And so because that was my first miscarriage, I thought, well, maybe I am supposed to be okay. Maybe it is nothing that really happened, And so I left the ER not really knowing what bag to put my emotions in. I was just like, okay, well, apparently because of how they responded, this is just something common and I just need to be okay with it and move on. And so the next day was when I actually went to the OBGYN for the follow-up. And as we were in, I was talking to the nurse there who was, taking all the information. And she said, what are you here for? And so I told her, I said, well, I can't remember at this point how far along I was. I want to say the next week I would have been in my second trimester. So that, I mean, I was right on the cusp, and that's the other hurting part of it, because I just needed to try to get through the first trimester in my mind. I just need to get through the first trimester. And as soon as I told her, you know, I was pregnant, but I miscarried yesterday, and so I'm here just for my follow-up, she immediately stopped and she said, do you want to see a counselor or a chaplain? And in my immediate response was like, no, like I don't need to, because from how they acted yesterday, apparently I'm supposed to be okay. And so I didn't want to show a sign of weakness in that moment. And so she said to me, she said, well, I asked her, I said, should I see a counselor? I mean, is it something? And so she said, you just experienced a loss. And this is a real thing. You were carrying a child, and you should not shrug it off, and you should not try to normalize it. You need to deal with what happened. And in that moment, she gave me room to be vulnerable and room to grieve. And I immediately took it. As soon as she said it, I burst into tears. And I just cried. And I realized that it was okay for me to feel hurt and feel grief and feel loss. And this was real. And that was a real child. And I should feel grief. But prior to that, I didn't know that it was okay for me to feel that way. And so Ginette, after I got home and everything, you don't want to call work. First of all, I hadn't told them I was pregnant. And so now I don't want to call them and tell them I was pregnant and I lost the baby, you know? And so you're going through that whole process. And so I didn't know how to handle it. What do you call and say at work? And then do people know how to respond to what has just taken place? Nobody that they know has died, right? Nobody that, you know, that they're already aware of has died. And so I remember Ginette came over, sweet as she can be, and she had brought some food to Leon and the family. And I heard her. I was upstairs. I had not left the room, had not left my bed, probably not brushed my teeth or taken a bath in the days from. But I heard her downstairs ask Leon how I was doing. And he didn't really have an answer, because he hadn't really said anything to me. Since I had come home, I had been in my room and he had been outside of the room. So I took that as another form of rejection. I've already lost a baby, and now this man don't want to have nothing to do with me. You know what I'm saying? And so he said, he told Ginette, I really don't know what to say to her. And she said, and you need to tell her that, because right now she's trying to process how you're feeling. And if you don't say anything, then that's going to affect her more. You at least need to let her know that you don't know what to say. And so I remember that, and she was exactly right. And, you know, and he did, and we went through that process. But then I learned that people don't know what to say. They don't know what to say. You know, if something happened and one of our children were injured, or, you know, God forbid, you know, one of our children that we've birthed, something happened to them, people know how to respond and they go into action immediately. But when somebody has a miscarriage, people just kind of shy away. They just kind of go to the closet. They just kind of like, I don't know what to say, so I'm not going to say anything because I don't want to hurt their feelings. Not realizing, honestly, that hurts more, you know? And so then, because nobody responds, then it just becomes the secret and the shame and the thing that you hold forever that you never talk about until today.
DeAnne, I'm sorry, not DeAnne. Dawn, I wanted to add too that there's already, you know, the trauma associated with miscarriage period. Of course, second trimester or even greater is even worse. But one of the things additionally that happened to me with that second trimester loss was after delivery. You know, it was just like you said, go home, be normal. Here's a counselor, here's, you know, a chaplain if you need it, and, you know, try to be okay. But I noticed that my period wouldn't come on. And I thought, well, this is odd. It should be something happening. And after 6 weeks, nothing. And I went back to the doctor, and it was oh, we're sorry. We left placenta in during the baby's birth, and sometimes that can happen. So unfortunately, your body is still telling itself that it's pregnant to a certain extent where it will not allow your period to start. Um, I came home with no baby to start. And then 3 days later, my milk came in. For those that might not know what that is, I mean, it was just horrible. And I'm sitting here knowing that I should be nursing my baby, but instead I'm just sitting here crying in pain. And then weeks pass and then no period. And then it's like, oh, sorry, you're going to have to go back into the hospital and have a DNC because we need to now remove the rest of the placenta so that your body's clock can get back to normal. And after all of these things, there was still never closure. There was never, anything that could help move past, exactly what was happening to me. So, I would sit alone and cry and be sad and try to keep myself together because I already had, 2 children. And that was probably some of the more horrible things that people did say to me. Oh, well, you already have kids. So, doesn't matter
Okay. Yeah.
how many you have. I could have had 10 more. I was committed to this baby just as much as I was committed to the ones that I already had. And I wanted to see it here just like I saw them here. So, people just don't know. But there's so many possible things that women are going through just during that private, time. And again, like you know, shame, just everything, just
Right.
everything.
Now, Ginette, what do you think when I experienced mine? I feel like you came to the rescue. What in you at that time? Was it your own experience of what you went through that kind of pushed you into action to be support for me?
I mean, I'm a caregiver by nature. So anytime someone's hurting, I'm right there. But I don't know. I think that like there was hope for me struggling with infertility. There was like loss for years, and that's a loss too. And so I saw you have hope, and like this is something unexpected, and it gave me hope, at the same time. And then with the loss, I mean, I knew I had not experienced that at that point, but I also just knew it had to be horrible, and I just can't imagine. And of course, my sister-in-law had miscarried. My sister had miscarried. But even then, you have no clue. I mean, it's just like, oh, that's terrible. But still, like the words can come, people can say the right things, but again, until they experience, I don't feel like they really know the pain. And everyone here has said trauma, like multiple times. And I feel like in our society, people don't hold that to the same trauma as suicide or another traumatic loss or a traumatic accident. But why?
Yeah.
I mean, it's like we're expected to go home, take care of any kids are at our home or whatever else is going on in our houses, and then go to work like 2 days later, or you get your 3 days of grieving time. And it's just unrealistic. And so, yeah, I don't know. I think it was just more of, again, like just the longing and wanting for me for so long to have a child, not to be able to, but then to see someone else who, was pregnant and now having to deal with that loss. I mean, it was just, I couldn't relate exactly, but I knew what the loss felt like, or the longing.
Yeah. Well, I definitely appreciate both of you all for just, being there during that time. Because like I said, until you know, you don't know. You really don't know. Now there was one of the questions that I was wanting to ask. What was your reasoning, Ginette, for really wanting to shed just light on this subject? You said that this is something that you've been wanting to talk about and wanting to shed light on.
Yeah, I mean, again, I think I have a couple of close friends who experienced multiple miscarriage, some late term miscarriages, you know, and then you have the whole topic of the abortion and, you know, like that gets misconstrued, but sometimes
Right.
it's not an
Spontaneous
option.
abortion. Yeah.
And so, but for me, I think coming from the job I do and being executive director and having staff who also may go through this or experience it, I don't want them to feel like they're not heard or really, I mean, they may not be understood because some people can't you know, you're never going to understand someone else's experience 100%. But I do want them just to feel like they can take whatever time that they need to. And not feel judged for it. Right. And I think it's just my own stuff that I carried into that. I mean, I had a board meeting to do. So I miscarried, I think it was on a Friday. It might've been a Saturday. I wanted to get out of the house. I just couldn't go back to the house. So I went to my in-laws until like Monday. That Tuesday I had a board meeting and I was like, well, I've got to get up and go to work, you know? And I sat there on the side of the bed and just lost it. And luckily I was able to call one of my coworkers and I said, I can't do this, you know, like I can't. And she did the board meeting for me, you know, just completely got up and did it and didn't have to do that, you know. But that's what I needed. Just someone to kind of say like, it's okay, stay home, cry, you know, because my husband could get up and go to work. So I was just like, well, I guess I should too. You know, the kids are functioning, they're at school. So, you know, what am I going to do? Just lay here? And that's what I needed to do. But I wasn't allowing myself to do that because I was worried people are going to judge me, you know, or think I'm weak or, you know, all that kind of noise in your head.
Right. I'm going to go to DeAnne real quick. But before that, I wanted to ask, just kind of piggybacking off of what Ginette just said about, you know, the husband going to work and you know, the children still going to school. LaKrisha, did all of your family know what was going on through each of your situations?
Somewhat. Most of the time, I would get probably further along before I would even tell them for any of the pregnancies because it just had gotten to the point where I didn't know if it was going to happen or not. So I just didn't want people asking questions. I didn't want to have to explain. I didn't want to have to respond. And, you know, my 95-year-old grandmother, who is not 95 at the time, she was like, well, you know, when you're elderly like that, you really shouldn't. And I said,
and I'm only laughing because I know your
elderly grandma.
Not funny, but just because I know your grandma.
She elderly, yes. So you know, there were a lot of things. She was one of the people that I did not want to know for that reason because I knew that I was going to be called elderly, and yet my 75-year-old mother was pretty much the same. She was like, oh, you know, your body just can't handle that kind of stuff, you know, when you get old like that. And I'm like, really? Y'all are laying it on. I'm not that old. But in my heart, though, I really did believe what they were saying. I really did feel old. So I didn't really, you know, I didn't share a whole lot. I didn't want people to know. There were times when, you know, well, right after it happened, I think I honestly expected my husband to just lay in the bed and just hold me like this until I just felt like not being held anymore. And that wasn't happening because kids still had to go to school. He still had to go to work. And I had to just be, you know, and then I had no one to call because at that time, none of the friends that I had ever gone through anything like this. So I'm like, who am I going to call? Who am I going to talk to? And I had no one. So I just sat and cried and stayed sad. And it was just a lot.
And that's so much of the reason that I want to have the conversations, and I'm so transparent about mine because I don't want anybody else to feel like that. I don't want anybody to feel like there's nobody else and this is a shame and girl, you need to go in the closet and hide that off. Come out the closet, let's talk, sit down, let me hold you, sis. We're gonna get through this together.
Right. You know? I'll hold you if you need it.
Right. Yeah.
Whatever.
Right.
Yeah.
And I don't want anybody to feel like they're going through on their own. I told my son the first time. I didn't tell my daughter because I just felt like she was too young to kind of understand. I told him from the beginning of knowing that I was pregnant. But with the second one, I didn't. I waited. And with the third one, again, the same thing, just trying to get through everything. With the second one, it was tough because I actually heard the heartbeat. Like we literally had just had the heartbeat and everything, and I was just so hopeful. And so that one was hard. It was definitely hard for me. Then with the third, I had already had the uterine fibroid embolization, which was supposed to take shrink my fibroids. And I was told after I had that procedure that I was not, the likelihood of me becoming pregnant was, really slim to none. And yet I got pregnant again. And so, yeah. But both you and DeAnne have experienced, multiple miscarriages. And so I wanted to just kind of go back to DeAnne real quick and just ask, after the loss of Megan, did you believe, or were you ever told that you might miscarry again? And what was that experience like for that miscarriage?
Well, I wasn't told that I would miscarry, although I did. I had Megan, and then I had a daughter, and then I had a miscarriage.
Okay.
And, but no one, they just told me that I was considered a high-risk pregnancy at that time, which meant that because Megan was so small, she was 1 pound, 9 ounces. I was cut twice. And that was actually to give her the best chance possible, because they needed to actually sort of go in and kind of scoop her out in that way. And so I was cut twice. So I was told that from that point forward with my future pregnancies, that I would not just go full term until my body went into labor, that I would have to have a C-section each pregnancy there out. And the longest that they would let me go would be about 36 weeks. And my last child, which was my son, I actually went 37 weeks with him. Mm-hmm. And because they were concerned about scar tissue and me stretching out so far that, baby maybe trying to come through scar tissue. So, but I was never left with the hope that, I should say hopeless, that I would not be able to have kids. And I do want to go back to add something that LaKrisha said, and that was, there's a book called Empty Arms. And I can remember I had purchased, I purchased the nursery set, the baby bed and all those things. And two of the very hard things for me was having to go back into that store, because as LaKrisha said, you're coming home with no baby. And so, and I was very visibly pregnant. And so I had to go into that store and tell them that they didn't give refunds. And so I had to tell them that I was no longer pregnant and that the baby had passed away. And then immediately when I came home from the hospital, it was in the shower, and I could almost still feel the phantom movements. And I looked down at my stomach and there's no baby. And so I think it's important to talk about those things, because as you said, Dawn, there's so many women that they feel very alone. Mm-hmm. And some of them are not sure how to articulate what they're feeling. And I think that by the four of us coming forward actually helps give them a voice. And I'm sure that there's so many that can draw off of our experiences, everything we've talked about. But again, going back to your question, I wasn't left with, a hopeless that I would not be able to have kids. And to go back to that hospital, my hospital experience again, I actually, when it was decided that Megan would come off the ventilator, I was prepped and told exactly what was going to happen, and that they would bring her to me, and she would just go peacefully. And that is exactly what happened. And they even allowed me to have pictures taken of her, like you have pictures taken of your baby when your baby's born. Mm-hmm. And so they came in, and there was a mother that had started making boxes and donating in these boxes to the hospital. And in the boxes were photo album, a little small photo album, camera, disposable camera, and I think some other little keepsake mementos. And that box was given to me, and it had a little preemie outfit, little hat in there. And so we were able to put that hat on her, and they took her to take pictures, and I was able to get those pictures. I was also offered counseling, and so my experience really was very different. A matter of fact, at the funeral, I must say, the neonatologist, she came to the funeral. I had probably a whole row of just the medical staff was there at the funeral services. And the neonatologist actually took me out to lunch about a month after the funeral services and encouraged me to think about starting a foundation, because she said that these women just don't have anyone when losses like this occur.
Mm-hmm.
So again, that's why this is really important for us to walk in our truth, and to have this moment here that you have so graciously put together for us to be able to share.
And I really appreciate, and I'm so glad that you had that experience. And you're absolutely right. Just what she told you about, trying to just create platforms and supports for women to have those conversations, and just having the support system that's there to let them know that they are not alone. And so if anybody else is even watching right now, if that resonates with you, please, let's step out on it. I'm all about just let's go forth and make some things happen. Go ahead.
I was going to say this, piggybacking on what you just said. Now, don't shoot the messenger here, but if we're going to speak truth, then we just have to speak truths. And sometimes that's not always a comfortable thing to hear.
Right.
But I will say that, many times we're expecting family, is going to be there for us. We have certain expectations. We may have a group, maybe, cousin, favorite aunt, whoever, and you're thinking that they're going to help you pick up the pieces. And it is, it's trauma on top of trauma when you realize that while you're going through it and you look around and there's no one there. And when you ask about it, well, I didn't know what to say to you. Mm-hmm. Well, my goodness, no one knew what to say to me. I would just be so alone. And sometimes you don't need to say anything. You can't fix the situation. You can't walk through that pain for me. It's something that I have to go through. Mm-hmm. But you could sure sit with me, and you can hold my hand, or you could give me a hug, or you could come watch a movie with me, or we could go out to eat, or something. Something like that.
To let me know that I'm not abandoned.
Yeah,
in
exactly.
This situation.
And I definitely I experienced some of that, and that added to the pain that I was already experiencing. Mm-hmm. So I had just made a vow that I was not going to allow her to be forgotten. I'd even had someone told me, well, you can celebrate her birthdays in private. And I thought, there's nothing private about a life a life.
Right.
And so I was not going to just sit in a corner and just me by myself with a cake at her birthday. And we still celebrate her birthday every year. Mm-hmm. It's grown in size because we get the number of balloons to release by her age. So my truck is filled with balloons on September 9th every year. Mm-hmm. I'm going to have to get a bigger vehicle, but so you find your way. And, as mothers and as women, I think it's time that we, there's so much strength in being vulnerable and showing vulnerability.
Absolutely.
People that it is a sign of weakness. No, it's really not. for each one of us to come here tonight, we had to do a lot of dying to self in order to share the story, that it would give hope to some other woman or just even a couple, you know, even because fathers, they grieve as well, but perhaps in a different way. And I think it just, that's that strength within that, being able to own your truth and being able to be vulnerable in front of who knows how many people are actually watching.
And you said something when you were talking about, you know, just understanding that sometimes that support is not going to be in the circle that you're familiar with. Sometimes that's so true. And again, while we want to make sure that people know that they have support, that they can identify somebody who's been through this, so that now I can say, hey, you know, we may not talk all the time, but I just went through this. Hey, now you're a part of the village, you know, and we have to take care of you. But I think definitely also having a measure of grace towards those family members and friends when they don't know what to say and they don't know what to do, and just kind of realizing that that's not where the support is going to come from. It's actually probably going to come from other women who have experienced what you've experienced, and being okay. And like you said, you're going to have to be vulnerable to be in there, because it may be something that someone you may not necessarily have been in close relationship with before. I mean, and that's the truth about it. And it seems like, you know, through this journey, those are the other women that I've connected with, as well as for myself through my experiences, but then also for others. Very quickly after I had my miscarriage, and I was just like, God, what is this about? What are you going to do with this? He's just started leading women to me who had miscarriages, typically younger women. And it would amaze me sometimes, because when they would talk about it, they would say, Dawn, I've never shared this with anybody else. And I said, and just God just, you know, made me available to be able to be who you needed to release it to. And I said, you know, I'm fine with that. I said, God, whatever you decide to do with it, hey, you know the plan and the purpose that you have for our lives. And so I'll go with it, you know, even though for me in the moment, that is my valley of the shadow of death. But I always tell everybody after the valley, there's a table prepared. And so that's just a part of the table. And every time we get back to that table, because I always believe Psalms 23 is a revolving circle. We either in green pastures, at still waters, on the path of righteousness, through the valley of the shadow of death, or we at the table. But every time we come back to the table, we need to be sitting at a different position. That's you know, right. The first time I went through my miscarriage and I came out of the valley, I was sitting in a high chair. I couldn't deal with it well. But now, after I come back and I'm sitting at the table, hey, now I'm helping to prepare the table. I might be, you know, cooking whatever the case may be. Every time we come back to that table, now we're in a different position position of maturity. We can't stay at the high chair forever, right? With somebody spoon feeding us, but we get stronger and stronger as we go through life and we experience certain things. And so that's definitely the truth in that. So thank you for sharing that with us, DeAnne. Now for me, I was one of those women who definitely just constantly, because all three of my miscarriages happened after the age of 40. And so I was always one of those ones who was constantly being told how old I was. I remember when LaKrisha was talking, I was thinking to myself, I remember one time in particular, I was at an appointment and there was a young lady who was checking in at the same time that I was. And she said that she was born in 1992, which was the year that I graduated from high school. And she was, definitely pregnant. And I was so insecure in that moment that here this young girl was, young woman who was having a baby, but her chances were going to be more favorable than mine. I was so insecure in that moment of being there with her, because I've never felt so old and decrepit at 40. Like, everybody say, hey, 40 is the new 20 or 30, and I feel great. But when people, when you're pregnant, are constantly telling you how old you are and you shouldn't be doing this, I mean, it is so hurtful to you. And so, I mean, and even from doctors, saying certain things like, miscarriage is kind of your body's or your Mother Nature's way of saying, like, this is not what's supposed to happen.
Right.
You're a doctor and you're telling me this, you know? And so it was very, very hurtful to go to the doctor and just never, just kind of have any reassurance or any hope. And also I was on the other side of, you know, we really should consider hysterectomy, but have you asked me, do I want children? Have you asked me, do I want any more children? Why is hysterectomy the option for me? Is there anything that can be done to allow me to have a successful pregnancy? And so that's a whole nother thing, just about some of the conversations that are had with some patients versus others, you know. But I literally was called on a Tuesday by a doctor and said, hey, I have an appointment time on Friday if you want to have a hysterectomy. Sir, we're talking about 3 days for me to make a life decision? No, I'm sorry, I'm not going to be able to do that. But the fact that you would even, and this was like not too long after the miscarriage, to call me on a Tuesday and say I have an appointment for a hysterectomy on Friday. That was to me, that was very insensitive. And I have not gone back or talked about or with that doctor since, because I just felt like that was just very insensitive. And so anyway, so that's, I don't bash anybody who has hysterectomies. Everybody has to, you know, make the decisions they have to make for their health. I did not want to have a hysterectomy because I still had hope. That was, and I had asked this question of everybody when I sent it out on the email. Did anybody feel like they needed to redeem themselves after a miscarriage? That's how I felt. Like with the first one, I wasn't trying to, you know, become pregnant. I wasn't expecting a pregnancy. But then after I had that loss, I needed a redo. I wanted to, like, yes, we need to try to get pregnant again. I need to redeem myself. Because the thing about it is, and going back to that doctor, one of the things that happened in one of our appointments, my husband was there with me. He completely stopped talking to me and started talking to my husband about their age and about the things they want to do. I mean, my husband wasn't necessarily active in the conversation, but he was just kind of talking to him like that was his friend. Like, you know, hey, you know, partner, because at this age, you know, we're trying to do this and we wait for the grandkids to come. And I'm literally sitting on the table like, but I've just lost a child and I want to hear other options. And so I shut down in that moment. But when I got to the car and I was talking to my husband, I said, I know that you were caught off guard with that conversation. I said, but this is how it felt to me. I said, your love language is being a provider. My husband gets up every day and he goes to work and he loves providing for his family. That's his love language. That's what he does. I said, and so just say one day something happens and somebody says, Mr. Green, you can't do it no more. You can't provide for your family. You're just not going to be able to do it. I said, how would you feel as a man that you can no longer provide for your family? And he just kind of looked. And I said, that's how I feel when somebody tells me I can't have a baby. I said, because as a woman, I feel like I'm supposed to just naturally be able to have kids. Like it's not supposed to be something that I'm supposed to struggle with. And so for me, that's a place of insufficiency for me. That's a place of insecurity for me. And so every time somebody just kind of disregards me as being able to bear a child, I said, it hurts. And I said, and I know you didn't just voluntarily go into that conversation, but that conversation had in front of me made me feel like that she's not completely a woman because she can't have any more kids. So, and so that was just kind of my experience, but that was very, very hurtful. And I was very insecure about that for a long time. And I really kind of just coming out of that point to being okay. But it was hard. That was very, very hard. And I get very, very angry that there are medical professionals who do not have proper bedside manner to deal with people who are struggling and suffering. And so therefore we have to do it in silence. When the safe place we can't even have a safe place with the doctor who specializes in it. How are we going to have a safe place in the world if we can't have it with the doctors? So, so that's just a part of my story with what has happened. So does anybody else have anything that they have dealt with a doctor?
Well, I do for sure. Like I said, when I was at the ER, it was a pretty good experience. And the fact, even the nurse, when she had to tell me, it was confirmed pregnancy, I'm just bawling at this point. And she's like, I'm going to cry too. And that was validating for me. I was like, oh, okay, so maybe it doesn't, like, I'm glad she's at least feeling something.
Right.
But then they referred me, of course, for a follow-up. I didn't have an OBGYN, didn't know I was pregnant, hadn't really needed one. And so with the hospital, they give you recommendations based out of their network. So I just picked one, any, mini, money, mo. And he was terrible. I mean, I just remember sitting there and they're doing all the blood work and everything. And I ended up having to go back, I don't know, probably 4 or 5 weeks. Might have been a little bit longer. I guess I can't remember what it's called, like your HSG, whatever hormone level, where your body still thinks you're pregnant. It just kept going and going and going. So I had to keep going back every week to get my blood work done. But when I met with him, I explained to him I'd been struggling with infertility. I've already done all the evaluations. It's unexplained. Everything looks fine. Every doctor's told me, like, we don't know why. It's just not happening. And he just said, well, at your age, if you're going to try again, you need to go right back to a fertility specialist, and he gave me a recommendation for it. And I'm like, I've already been to, and I've looked up, I'm very well versed in the fertility specialist around here, but that was his recommendation. And just know, like, I'm sorry. I was trying to figure out, like, is there anything wrong, with me? And, or it's the same stuff. Like, it's just, it's just sometimes that's what happens. It's just the way of getting rid of any abnormalities. Well, you don't tell someone who's never been pregnant, or who's just wanting that for so long. You don't say that to them. But it was so bad that I told my PCP, who was also in that same network, like I would never go back to him. And I don't think he should be seeing people who had miscarriages. Like, it was just very insensitive. And just to be told, okay, well, get right back on it and go see a fertility specialist. And, I heard that and I was upset about it. But then I was like, okay, well, I guess that's what we need to do. And we went and paid money again and had all the tests done again, and was told, well, IVF, $30,000 because you're getting older, and it was just very disheartening. And so that was just kind of my experience. ER was fine, as fine as it could be, I guess. But then the follow-up was just like, you're an OBGYN, like, what are you doing? So.
And I was going to ask Dr. Adams Pickett, like, is there any particular, like, she's an OBGYN, and that was one of the reasons I wanted a female OBGYN because I've had such a horrible experience with men. And so I really wanted to just kind of ask her, is there any type of training that they put anybody through who may not be, a specialist as it relates to OBGYN, but sensitivity? I didn't, experience that at all. So did any of you feel like you received the all of the medical facts and information you needed to support you physically and emotionally? I know DeAnne kind of talked about it specifically. You just said, what about you, LaKrisha?
So it just varied, at different times. Going back to what you said about, being a geriatric pregnant person,
right,
is that my chart was personally stamped AMA, and it was big and red. And I said, why is that on there? Oh, we just want to be able to locate our mommies that might need a little more help, faster than others. I said, what is AMA, ma'am? And it was advanced maternal age. And I thought, wow, advanced maternal age, and I'm not even 40 yet. And it wasn't that bad, but it was still one of those situations where I realized that, you can have problems at any age, but I guess at this point I really did need a little bit more attention than I received. And I didn't have the luxury of choosing being AMA. I didn't have the luxury of choosing, a female doctor or a male doctor. I had a whole team, and it was the maternal fetal medicine specialist for the hospital that I was planning to deliver at. And at any given time, it was about 6 or 7 of them. You could see whichever one was the one that was scheduled to be there, because every Monday they sat and had a conversation about all of the patients that were under their care and what were the needs and what they suggested needed to happen. And, because I love to talk, I just said, well, how are you all going to manage my care? By the time it was just, there was something about being almost 43, about to have a baby, knowing that, well, finding out that I was pregnant, being almost 43, and they just had to they had to speak to me differently at that point. They just weren't able to say whatever they wanted to say, and I just take it and go away and just kind of disappear into the night. You needed to really explain to me exactly what it is that's happening. How are you going to help me bring this baby into the world? And having to sit down and they say, how many pregnancies, and I have to say 8, and how many live births, and then I only say 4. There's something that does something to you every single time that happens.
Right.
And it's just like, can you just see it in the chart? Do you have to ask me that every time? Because there's a piece of me that chips away and that breaks down every time I have to think about the fact that I've been pregnant 8 times. And unfortunately for me, becoming pregnant has never been an issue. It's the staying pregnant part that I had the problems with. And a lot of people associate miscarriage with, or infertility. It's still all in the same thing. It's all the same thing. I mean, I'm not necessarily infertile, but these babies weren't making it here, or they were coming extremely early. And it was something that needed to be, addressed, and it had to be discussed. And so I kind of demanded, a different level of care by the time I got to my 8th pregnancy. I spoke up for myself a lot more than I did earlier on, because I knew, I felt like I had a PhD in miscarriage, if you would even say as such, because I had experienced it. I knew what was happening. I knew why it was happening, because like you mentioned, it wasn't that I felt like, okay, now we got to go. I got to get pregnant again. I need to see if I can do this. It was still a part of me, though, that once I found out I just went into, high gear. It's like, okay, what do I need to do? I need to have appointments. You all need to make sure you see me this amount of times. And I need you all to call me or call me back. It was, it was almost like OCD at some point. It got really bad, but I demanded the care that I felt like wasn't just automatically being offered to me.
And I think
that I felt like I should have been offered, because there's a lot of women that aren't going to demand that.
right. And I think that's one of the things that you wrote. You said that you learned how to advocate for yourself, and I think that's
yes.
It's hard, especially if you talked about having 8 pregnancies. Like of course you had some experience to get there, but some women never get to that point, but then give up and lose hope before they get to the point to be strong enough to truly advocate for themselves, or to have a person that they are connected to who can advocate for them, or teach them how to advocate for themselves. So yeah, wow.
Right. Many different, experiences, because I didn't think that I would be able to have children after I had uterine fibroid embolization as well, because what also contributed to a lot of my issues were the fibroids. At probably in 2005, I think they removed like 30 fibroids from golf ball size all the way down. And those contributed to a lot of the problems that I was having as far as carrying the babies full term, or to any level of term for that matter. Those were some of the things that were contributing to that as well. So it was a real process. And I just didn't even think that after 2 uterine fibroid embolizations, to try to minimize, even after the removal of 30 fibroids, I still had some fibroids. So I just felt like, oh, well, it's just what it is. It'll be fine. I guess maybe it'll just work itself out. And when they told me that I was pregnant, I thought, who's pregnant? Because I've had 2 uterine fibroid embolizations, and I was told that I couldn't have kids after that. So if you are hearing this, please know that that is not true.
Well,
if you take nothing away from this, take away that. That is not true. She's downstairs right now. Okay. Not true.
Wow.
Not true.
Yep. There's so much that you just have to learn along the way, it seems.
Right.
Definitely. Definitely. Does anybody else want to add anything before we move on? One of the things, and we've kind of shared it as we've gone along, just kind of those things that people have said to us. So for anybody who is watching now, or those who may watch the replay, what are some things, and Ginette, because you put something on your post that I reposted, what are some things that people should not say to their friends? You can say some, and then we'll kind of go round robin from there. What are some things definitely that we should not say? People should not say. You are not helping me by saying this.
It just wasn't meant to be, or in my case, even, well, at least she got pregnant. I'm like, okay, but that's away from, I just lost the pregnancy. So
right. Wow. What about you, LaKrisha?
For me, it was, oh, well, don't worry about it. You know, you already have kids. So that's one of the ones that I mentioned earlier that was always very, very hurtful, was that, oh, well, you already have kids. Because that just didn't matter.
Yeah. What about you, DeAnne?
I actually have those written down because that was a very sensitive thing for me. So probably the one that really got me the most was, at least you didn't have her long enough to create a bond. At least you didn't take her home and start bonding with her. And it's a little bit different for you than the mom who lost her child at, her daughter died at 21 years of age. And you can always try for another one. And this was just God's way of telling you your body wasn't ready. She's in a better place. That and you can just, have your own little private celebration. And it was like, and I had pretty much sworn to myself at that time. I said, you know what? I was so angry about it. I said, before Oprah goes off the air, I'm going to go on Oprah's show and I'm going to tell the world, this is not what you say.
Right. Well, it's not Oprah, but look, y'all speak it into existence.
That's all right.
That's right, but we're still gonna tell it. We're still gonna tell it anyway. We're gonna let it get out there. This is not what you say. So my ultimate one, and I've already said it a couple of times, is that you're so old. You still want to have a baby? You still want to have a baby? And so just kind of, well, even if I didn't, but I'm married to my husband. We've been together now for 17 years. Regardless of my age, I mean, what are my options? I'm gonna have a child with my husband. So yeah, so just different things. So just, if you're watching, go to Ginette Williams's Facebook page and see the things that you do not say and things that you should say instead of what you might be thinking of saying. And to say this though, I understand that it's not said like with malice intent. It's not. But sometimes not knowing, we can say insensitive and careless things. And so we just need to be aware of those things so that we don't do them. And so it's not meant to shame anybody else if you've said those things. Just educate yourself so that you can better support your friends and family members who may experience this or who have experienced this. Because one of the things that I encourage people to do, even on yesterday, if you had somebody who experienced this and you know that you did not necessarily offer them the support they need, just reach out to them and say, hey, I validate what it is that you experienced. And, and I'm sorry that I didn't know what to say. If it's ever a time that you do need me, let me know. But definitely please educate yourself so that those women do not have to live in shame, embarrassment, and guilt and secrecy about what it is that they have experienced.
And Dawn, please invite us to the baby showers, to different things that are happening with, your pregnancy that may have continued. I remember going back to work And the young lady and I, who was considerably younger than me, she was pregnant, and I had lost my pregnancy. And I do remember looking at her, like this. It was however you could look at someone to let them know that you disapprove. It was just all of that. And I didn't let her, of course, see me looking at her that way, but when she wasn't looking, that's how I was looking. And they didn't want to invite me to her baby shower. Well, you just lost the baby, and I know, but I don't want to be excluded. I don't want people walking on eggshells around me. I don't want people feeling like, they can't, that I'm not still human. I can still find some joy in my heart for you, that you are going to be able to experience motherhood in some kind of way. Or either I just may send you a gift and not attend at all because it might be too painful. And that's okay. But just don't exclude us and act like, oh, well, because that happened, you probably don't want. Now you're drawing attention to the fact that somebody that you would have invited, someone that that probably would have attended, you've now not even bothered to invite them because you think that they're going to feel some kind of way. And that is the some kind of way that they feel excluded. So now you've added another layer of being excluded on top of the pain that they're already experiencing.
Right. Some years ago, I had attended a workshop on grief in the workplace, and it was talking about just approaching grief in the workplace and talking about more specifically like the circle of grief that affects the community. So if not just somebody in my immediate family has to pass away, if somebody associated with something near to me, then I still get the same effect. So if somebody loses their mother, and my mother had the same thing, just those type of things. But we were just dealing with as leaders, like how to better deal with being supportive and empathetic to those who may experience grief and how to better support them. And one of the questions that the facilitator asked at that particular time was, what is a way that people do not know how to respond to when somebody, dies? And of course, I shared, miscarriage. And I remember just feeling my heart was beating so fast when I said that, because it was the first time I had actually talked about it. And she asked me to elaborate, expound, tell us what you mean. Well, in order for me to expound and say what I meant, I had to tell my story. And I did, and I was so shameful. I was embarrassed to be talking about it, but now I'm out here, right? And I was so comforted by how the women around me responded, the support that they gave, the love that they showed, the hugs that they gave, either telling me their own testimonies afterwards, or just hugging me and say, Dawn, I didn't realize, that happened to you, but I'm here for you. And I think one of the things that we've said throughout this forum tonight, as well as what I've been looking at in the actual chat, is that, just being there is part of the process. Just be there. Just let me know you're there. Sis, it's okay if you don't know what to say, but just let me know. And then for those who may be in leadership, who have young people, and let's go back to what DeAnne said. It may not be the woman, it may be the husband who's having to deal with it, because sometimes I think we brush over, the men. And kudos to Ginette, for saying that if she has someone who falls under her umbrella that goes through this, that she'll know how to sympathize and empathize with them, so that that they can truly get the support that they need to begin the healing process. Because what happens when we are in secret and when we are in shame and we don't deal with stuff, we just bury it under the surface until it explodes from something else later. And we just continue to hide it away, whatever those feelings are. And so we just have to make sure that we don't do that to ourselves, but we also help with the process so that other people don't have to do it as well. And so that's just kind of always what I, what I think about. I know, DeAnne, you talked about going to counseling. Did you say you went through counseling after your daughter Megan and with your miscarriage?
I went through counseling briefly. Yeah, I went through counseling probably for about a good 6 months after. Again, and that was I just felt rather alone and trying to process the emotions, and I knew that I needed to get it out because I've just never been a type of person that I always say that what's nat and I guess because I work in the medical field, so excuse my analogy, but what's nasty and rotten in the inside, you have to vomit that stuff out. You have to get it out. It's just because you're not able to move forward, and those emotions unchecked usually go on to manifest themselves in some physical manifestation of some other kind of illness or condition.
Right.
And so I knew that that was something that I just was not going to let happen to myself. So I looked for outlets of how I could release that energy and what I was feeling. And I actually had a sorority sister that owned a publishing company in Chicago, Illinois, and they were working on a book. They were looking for 50 different authors to contribute their stories, and the proceeds of the book was going towards building an orphanage in Africa. So it was a missionary project, and I jumped on that immediately because I thought the way that I could release and also memorialize her, Megan, in a way. So now her life contributed to help building an orphanage in Africa. And so I just decided to, because when life deals you a bad hand, you can do one or two things. I mean, you can go south with it, or you can say, am I going to let this define me for the rest of my life, or I'm going to take this? And as you had said, Dawn, how does God want to use this?
Right.
Because he wastes no tears. So even the tears of the mothers, us as mothers who've lost their babies, we're still mothers. That doesn't change anything. If I had not had any more kids after Megan, I was still a mother. And there are so many other kids out there as well that they need the mothering, even the children that didn't come from our own womb. And I think Ginette, I think you said that Ginette was giving of herself that way. I think, was it stepkids or something? So there's always opportunity for us to mother, because we're nurturers by nature.
Now, one of the points to that, and I'm going to let us conclude here in a second, but one of the things that I just want to share with anybody who may be watching to understand, though, because I know, I share that I have a daughter who is adopted. Do not necessarily assume that because you adopt, it will take away your desire to naturally have your own children. Though my daughter is a very great part of our family and adds to, the colorfulness of it, it did not remove my desire to want to have my own children. So if there's anybody who is watching who thinks that maybe through adoption, that will just fill the void in me, make sure that you just kind of process through that completely, pray about it. Also make sure that you and your spouse are on the same sheet of music as far as it relates to that. I was reading one time and it was saying that, couples have decided to adopt, and the husband just felt like, okay, she'll be good after this. After we adopt, she'll be good. And the wife wasn't good after that. So just know that sometimes adopting does not necessarily fill that void of wanting to have your own children, and that you'll need to process through that as well. So I just kind of wanted to share that. But as we get ready to conclude, what do any of you want to say to other women who are struggling through infertility or pregnancy? Is there anything that you want to specifically leave with them on tonight? I always try to make sure that through sharing testimonies and things like that, that we also offer hope and resources I hate that right now that Dr. Adams Pickett wasn't able to be on with us to also offer the facts and the science to some of the things that we are saying. However, she and I hopefully will be interviewing with each other soon, and I'll be able to put her information in the written blog that will go out on next week. But ladies, right now the floor is yours. Again, what would you like to say to other women who struggle with fertility and pregnancy?
So one thing I'd like to say is also, all of us probably know the days that we had our miscarriages or stillbirths or infant loss. And it's okay to grieve that all the time, but that day specifically every year. And I think that's something that is kind of overlooked, even family, husbands, friends.
Mm-hmm.
Why are you still sad about that? Well, I don't want to get out of bed today because this reminds me of, a year ago when this happened, or 2 years. So don't be afraid to, even if it's 5, 10 years out, whatever, just if you're having a hard time with it, if you need to talk to someone, reach out. And then the other thing I would say is, somebody made the good point of, there's LaKrisha, who got to the point where she was able to advocate for herself when she went to the doctor. I would say, if you have a miscarriage, you haven't had one before, or you don't feel confident that you can advocate for yourself, find someone who's gone through it and take them with you. I had my husband, but he didn't know either, and so the way that we were treated and what we were told, I don't think was right. I was scared. I had millions of questions, but I didn't even know what questions to ask. And so just, again, don't be afraid to try to find someone who's gone through it. And of course, the only way we're going to know is if we tell each other. So, and I think somebody said this earlier too. It's amazing how once it happens, people are, oh, that happened to me too. No clue, had no clue, but I think we've got to build a strong network of each other.
Absolutely. Absolutely. Thanks, Ginette.
Mm-hmm.
And before LaKrisha or DeAnne say anything, I was going to say, even when you were talking about, your husband again, as women, we may have to also help our husbands, our partners find, support as well, because it's not that they're not going through it. We were talking about, our male husbands, they deal with things, they process differently. And it's not that they're not processing, it's just that they don't necessarily do it out loud. But we need to also help them so that they can help us, right? So, all right, DeAnne and LaKrisha.
Go ahead, Krisha.
Mm-hmm.
All right. Well, again, thank you, Dawn, so much for this opportunity. It does help a lot because even for me, and even though my second trimester loss has now been more than 12 years ago, I did not process it well at all. Like DeAnne, they did the hat, the blanket, the pictures. I have all of that, but it is in a box. It is in the top of the closet. And if my eye glances the top of the closet in that box at any given time, I'm immediately back in that moment. So I don't even believe that I fully processed that loss, even though I've had other losses and 2 children after. And I guess that's on me. I might need to unpack that again at some point, just to really get it out of my system, or just find a different way of dealing with it. Because I should be able to go in my closet and see the box and not feel some type of way. But I know what's in the box. I know that his pictures are in the box. And I even asked my husband before, I'm like, have you looked in the box? And he was like, no, I don't need to do that. And I'm like, why not? Because in my heart, I feel like he does probably need to do it too. Because naturally men are fixers. And my husband, like you were talking about with Leon, it's the same thing. Mm-hmm. They want to fix everything. And so the tears and the crying and the not being able to fix it was very difficult for him.
Right.
And even now, if I even look like I was having some type of issue with it, he probably would just try to find a way to get out of it. Like, what's happening here? Mm-hmm. They just can't. They're strong, but still, it's something that they can't fix. But again, I think the biggest thing for me, the takeaway is really just the self-advocacy, if you're able to do that, because whatever testing, things that you might not think of, you go in there and you just ask for those things up front. Say, I need testing. I need you to talk to me about what my odds are. I need you to talk to me about what this looks like. What are my chances, if you can even give me that information? What should I be doing outside of here? Eating, reading, what should I do? And those were the things that I went into my 8th and final pregnancy doing. I went in there, I might as well have had that gold chain on with the big boss across it. I went in there. I felt bad for them because I was walking fast, reared back because I was already big at that point. I'm like, how are we going to move forward with this? I think I embarrassed my husband because he was just like, you don't have to do all that. I mean, yes, I do. I need them to understand what I have gone through, how devastating it was for me, where I am right now, and how they're going to help me make this come into fruition, as best as possible. And I had to deliver at 36 weeks because the second child at 25 weeks, I had the vertical incision on my uterus and the C-section, the bikini cut C-section, which then meant that now I can't go beyond 36 weeks. So all of those things had to be discussed, and I needed them to explain to me exactly what it was, what was the plan, what is this going to look like? Because I don't like surprises, and I don't like being caught off guard in any way. And after everything that had happened, and being caught off guard, and being vulnerable, and having to try to live through that vulnerable place and still take care of myself and my family, was just something I wasn't willing to do anymore. I needed to have someone take care of me and make sure that I was going to be okay. And I need to be able to trust them that they're going to be the ones to do that for me.
Right. Well, good for you. Good for you. I think the biggest thing that I would just tell anybody who's experienced it in this is to talk about it. Find you a safe place to talk, but do not keep it to yourself. Don't let it build up in you. Find you that support system that you need to have the conversations that you need to, because it's just so important. It is just so important to your mental well-being, your overall health and well-being. And so just continue to have the conversations. Don't be afraid to talk about it, because again, like Ginette said, you'll say it to somebody and then you'll realize there's another woman who hasn't said it before either, who will then say, oh, it happened to me too. And so we just need to be able to have those conversations to help each other as women matriculate through this thing. I always say that I stand on what Luke 22:31 says, that, Satan desires to sift us like wheat, but after we have been strengthened, we have to go back and strengthen our brother, sister in this case, right? But that's what we're charged to do. Yes, we're going to go through things, we're going to go through challenges, but once we have overcome and been strengthened, we have to then go and strengthen somebody else, because it's not just about us. It's not just about us. The Bible also says that, that they overcome by the blood of the Lamb and the word of their testimony. It's not just what we've overcome and gone through, it's also our testimony that we have to speak to help others overcome. So I think that's just kind of all that I have on tonight. I was looking in the chat. We didn't necessarily have any questions, but I appreciate everybody who is taking the time out of their Friday night to just be a part of the conversation, to listen, to offer. A lot of people talk, a lot of people sent hugs our way, of course. Some people shared, the losses that they've had. Others, just thanked us for the transparency and the vulnerability, of course. Talking about this being a good conversation. I want to send a special shout out to Miss Lene Bolden. Miss Lene Bolden, she is another transparent mother that she doesn't have any biological children of her own, but she has an adopted daughter. And so she has been such a support to me, having adopted my daughters, the person that I really rely on, she and her daughter, with kind of helping us just through certain processes with this. But also she's just so transparent about her story. And so she is such a blessing. And like DeAnne said, you know, she's a mother to so many people, though she doesn't have her own biological children. So I just want to thank her for just what she's added to the chat and to the conversation. She's definitely one of those people. I should have also had her on here tonight, but just sending my love your way, Miss Bolden, definitely. So, and thank again everybody else for coming on. So, all right, this has been another conversation. I hope that everyone has found this dialogue helpful as well as somewhat therapeutic. If you joined us late, don't worry, the replay will be available here on Facebook and on YouTube. Please share it with those you feel would find this information helpful. As always, I want to thank my guests on tonight, Miss Ginette Williams, Miss LaKrisha Lindo, and Miss DeAnne Winey. I think I may have shared earlier that there were two other ladies who were originally going to come on tonight, but were unable to, you know, maybe just not being able to share the story yet. No shame in that. We know it all takes a process and everybody gets there when they get there. So we send love and support their way on tonight, as well as anyone else who may not just be at that point where you can just be as transparent as we're being. Please don't take that as a place of shame for you, but just know that it can come. We haven't always been here, but it can come.
No.
So we just want to thank you. I want to thank each of you personally for taking your time to add to the conversation, and thank everyone who took the time to watch and listen to what we had to say. Take care and God bless you, and good night.
Thank you.